Hello everyone, this is Shannon from That's So Po, and today I'm doing week 17 of my 2023 reads. This week I finished so many amazing books, almost all of which were for Trans Girl April, although I did DNF one, and I just can't wait to tell you about how great these books were. Timestamps and content warnings are in the description box below. First, I finished The Light We Carry by Michelle Obama. I listened to this on audiobook, which was excellent because I love Michelle Obama's narration. It's just so engaging, and I thoroughly enjoyed this book. So this is sort of a really interesting book. Her first book, Becoming, was her memoir. This book, I would say, is life advice from Michelle Obama. And so it's sort of like her being your mentor and giving you advice on all these different areas of life, from mental health to relationships to work and activism, and really just kind of weaving in a lot of anecdotes of her own life and how that has informed the way that she thinks about these things, or just examples of how she's put them into practice. And it just feels like having her be your mentor and kind of share ideas with you of what kinds of approaches you can use and what sort of techniques you can use to take care of yourself and live a good life. And a lot of it also is totally resonating some of the ideas that I've seen in a lot of really great positive psychology and dialectical behavior therapy books. So it's like solid advice in this, but very much framed just as her life advice. It was thoroughly enjoyable, definitely moved me a ton, reminded me of some really, great things, just like, yeah, you go through this stuff and that's okay. Just such a lovely book, and I loved listening to her narrate it. So I gave this 5 out of 5 stars. And if you need just somebody kind of feeling like, they're in your corner and giving you good advice, I definitely recommend this. Then the rest of the books that I read this week were all for Trans Girl April, starting with 10 Steps to Nanette by Hannah Gasdby. Gasdby is a Australian comedian who came out with a really sort of groundbreaking Netflix special, Nanette, and this is sort of their memoir, but also kind of talking about what led up in their life to that show. They led a really interesting life growing up in Tasmania and, sort of kind of being closeted queer, and later in life discovering that they were autistic, and just sort of all of the trials and tribulations that they went with. I think that just like with Nanette, with that Netflix special, there is like this mixture of comedy and pointing out sort of the ridiculousness of things, but so much seriousness in terms of talking about like the anti-queer sentiment in Australia, talking about a lot of tough topics and just a lot of the really rough situations that they went through because they were so different and because they were so vulnerable to abuse. So there's definitely quite a bit of content warnings for this one, so I will link this below. But it was so moving, and again, I listened to this on audio and that narration style was so fantastic. I was thoroughly engaged the whole time. And I also loved the way that they wove in all of these little side notes about some of the politics that were happening in Tasmania when they were growing up, and sort of should homosexuality be decriminalized was one of the big topics there, and how that affects them growing up as queer. So yeah, this is absolutely such a good audiobook. Becca at Read Becca had read this earlier and raved about it, so I'd really wanted to get to it, and I'm so glad that I finally did. I gave it 5 out of 5 stars. Then I finished The Merry Spinster by Daniel M. Lavery. This is a collection of sort of creepy classic tale retelling short stories. So you've got everything in here from like Little Mermaid and Beauty and the Beast to things like The Velveteen Rabbit or The Wind in the Willows. So lots of different things are being retold in this, and they're very kind of creepy and slightly twisted versions of this, with a lot of social commentary and especially a lot of sort of feminist commentary, I would say. So these stories have the humor style that I know Lavery is amazing at. I love his other book, Text from Jane Eyre, so much. And this definitely had that same humor style, that same way of writing that totally gripped me. But these stories got pretty dark. Like the Velveteen Rabbit one was so dark. The Wind in the Willows one was so dark. So even though I like things a little bit creepy and dark, like I love Edgar Allan Poe, this was pretty dark. Like these were pretty grim, but also the writing was fantastic and these takes on these stories were really interesting. There were also some stories that did a little bit more of like a take on some religious stuff, because I believe he grew up in a pretty fundamentalist Christian community. So there's more of that than I fully could grasp what it was saying. Like some of it went over my head. So yeah, but overall, I thought this was a really strong collection, but man, it was darker than I was expecting. So yeah, I gave this 4 out of 5 stars. Next, I finished The Gods of Tango by Carolina de Robertis, which was so fantastic. I absolutely loved this book. This is a historical fiction set in the early 1900s in Buenos Aires, Argentina. And we follow a trans man who is an immigrant from Italy to Buenos Aires. He grew up as a woman in Italy and moved to Buenos Aires at 18 in order to marry his cousin, only to find that his cousin had passed away right before he got there. And living as a woman, the options were very, very limited. And so he decided to kind of change his life and dress as a man, especially so that he could pursue his passion, which was playing the violin for tango music, which was not something that women could do at that point. But as he does this, he realizes just how much, not only does he love playing the violin and love the music, but he loves being a man and he loves what that offers him, and finds that he also really is attracted to and loves women. And so this is a story of just his sort of coming of age and his sexual awakening, his music awakening, just all of this passion for life and for music and for sex and for exploration. And it's just this beautiful, beautiful story. I loved the way that side characters occasionally got chapters in this, and like their stories were so fascinating. It's just such a well fleshed out world. It's a passionate story. The history in this is absolutely fantastic. You know, you're in Buenos Aires, which is going through so much change. There's so many immigrants. There's all of these, you know, workhouses, and there's all of these conventillos, which are like tenement housing. And you have so many people striving to survive in such difficult conditions. You have workers' rights movements, you have government oppression. It's just such a fantastic book. I loved everything about this, the writing, the history, the characters, the passion in it. It is just beautifully written. I highly, highly recommend this. If you enjoy historical fiction at all, it was excellent, and I gave it 5 out of 5 stars. Then I read King and the Dragonflies by Kacen Callender. This is a contemporary middle grade about a boy, King, who loses his older brother. His older brother dies, and he's going through a lot of grief. His family's going through a lot of grief, but also he's dealing with just a lot of issues at school and in the community, issues of racism, issues of, you know, homophobia. His friend, who he's kind of not friends with anymore, had confessed to him that he was gay, and there's just all of this conflict of trying to figure out, what does that mean, and is it okay to still be friends, especially given some of the toxic masculinity, and some of it kind of perpetuated by his own dad and by, you know, his brother who had passed away, and just all of these things kind of coming together, and him processing the grief over his brother's death. It's just a beautiful story. It has a lot of depth to it, a lot of heart, a lot of this kind of queer coming of age type of story. It's really lovely, and I just loved the writing in this. It's such a great middle grade if you like middle grade at all. So I gave it 5 out of 5 stars. Then I finished Little Blue Encyclopedia for Vivian by Hazel Jane Plante. So this is a book that Kevvie at Say Kevvie has really strongly recommended, and I'm so glad that I got to it because it's such a fascinating book. So this is, I would say, almost in the style of a mockumentary, where it is basically a person who is writing almost an encyclopedia about this TV show that exists in the novel called Little Blue, that her friend who passed away was really, really into. And so it's sort of done as a memorial to the friend who passed away, but just has so much in it that is details about this show as well as about all other sorts of things that sound so real, except that they're not. It was such a fascinating read. It's really eclectic. It has a lot of heart, but it also you know, has a lot of whimsy in it because it's all of these things about this fake show. And there were so many times that I looked up different things, not related to the show, but other things that the book talked about Vivian, the one who passed away, loving. And some of them were real and some of them were not. And I could not tell the difference. It all felt so real. So this was just such a cool book. I thought it was really interesting in the premise and just this picture that it drew of Vivian and the kind of complexities of her character and who she was in her life. It was a beautiful style of a memorial, even if it's all fiction. I loved this. I thought this was such a cool read, and I loved the way that it ended too. Really, really awesome. So yeah, I adore this. I gave it 5 out of 5 stars. And lastly, I did DNF one book, which was Unicorn by Amrou Al-Kadhi. This is a memoir about a queer Muslim drag queen that I had started reading and really loved the humor style in the introduction, but the further along that I went in this story, the more I found that I just wasn't being very engaged. So I got to 29% in this, and I found that although there was still quite a lot of humor, the writing itself just wasn't working for me. I just found myself not being very deeply engaged in the story, even though memoirs usually are very engaging for me. I think that the life experiences that Al-Kadhi has gone through is very fascinating. Their family is Iraqi, but they grew up mainly in Bahrain and then moved to the UK when they were like kind of a preteen, I think. And so they've got very interesting experiences. They have this very religious upbringing, and there's a lot in this about them trying to grapple with being, you know, queer, being somebody who is gender non-conforming, all of these sorts of things within their very restrictive community and religion, and trying to, you know, deal with all of those things. So I do think that the experiences that Al-Kadhi has gone through are very, very worth listening to, but I just couldn't stay engaged in this book, so I finally had to put it down. Okay, that is everything that I read and DNF'd this week. This week was filled with so many amazing books. If any of the ones that I talked about today sound interesting to you, I really recommend you pick them up because this was just one of the best reading weeks. It was so good. If you guys have any thoughts, if you want to chat about any of the books, if you want to tell me what you've been reading this week, I would love to hear from you. Just leave me a comment down below.